since he is building when there had been no significant rain on the earth, the likes of which an ark would have been needed for. I suppose he would have felt more greatly assured about this had he not been the only one building. But he nonetheless follows his stirred faith, and Noah builds the ark. The reward for him, I suspect, is when he shuts that door to the constructed ark, having collected his family and a male and female of every living thing on the earth. And he hears the release of the waters that had been held in the heavens, now crashing on the earth for 40 straight days. For 40 straight days, the floods persisted and the waters were released. God's decision to start all over with this human experiment programmed with free will, and Noah had to be deeply grateful to have been selected to steward this mission, to be spared from and delivered to the other side of this flood purging. I can imagine that Noah had to be anxious to see what life would look like post-flood. After 40 days, the flood waters finally stopped, and the entire creation is now flooded. Everything, animal and plant, everything living destroyed. All the while, the floating future of the entire earth is shut up in the ark, waiting to see what will God do next. The Bible tells us that for the next 150 days, the flood covered the earth. Until then, the text says, God remembered Noah. And that line suggests that at that moment, God started letting the waters slowly recede. When Noah at last saw mountain peaks for the first time since shutting the door of the ark, Scripture informs us he sends out a raven and observes, using the raven to detect whether there was anything out there no longer underwater. And what he notices is that raven flies to and fro, finding absolutely no place to rest. And after Noah watches the raven, he sends out a dove. And the dove returns, having found not one place to perch outside of the ark. And when the dove returns, Noah opens the window, brings it back inside, and shuts the window. He then waits 7 more days and releases that dove again, and the dove, still not finding a place to perch, returns to the ark. But this time, this dove returns with a leaf in its beak, and Noah now has to wait 7 additional days. And once again, he releases that dove, and this time we're told the dove doesn't return. Noah removes the covering from the ark and notices that the earth is completely dry. Now, my brothers, my sisters, we know, don't we? We know he felt grateful to have been selected to survive. When he shut in, he had to feel equally, if not more, grateful to have survived and to see the reward of obedient faith. We know how Noah felt prior to the waters being released. This requires no guessing, no speculating. Noah was relieved that he had spent his life obeying God, concerned about his future, wondering about whether he is able to manage the unknown. We know how Noah feels. We know how he is emoting these days, carrying the weight of the entire survival of every living creature on the earth on his shoulders, wondering to himself, how long will all of this last? We know also how Noah felt when he finally emerged from the ark for the first time after the waters receded. This requires no guessing. It requires no speculating. Noah was grateful that he had obeyed. He is humbled that he was selected. He is hopeful with regard to the future. He lives in awe of the power of God. He has to be elated that he was finally moving toward the unknown future, anticipatory about tomorrow and the days to come. Noah has to be worshipful of the God whose anger lasts for a moment, but whose mercy extends for a lifetime. So we know how Noah must have felt going into the ark. We know how Noah must have felt emerging from the ark, and oh, that life would be so neatly packed, brothers and sisters, with this kind of balance. But what struck me is the number of days in between that Noah had to manage the disappointment of seeing the raven fly without finding a resting perch and knowing that meant it wasn't time yet. After so many days and weeks and months, the anxiety of releasing the dove and then having to open that window and bring that same dove back in and wait 7 more days. And that day when the dove returned with a leaf in its beak, but yet again to be prevented from moving towards life on the other side of this ark and flood season. And finally, to have reached that place when that dove is released and does not return. How did Noah handle the repeat letdown as symbolized by the patterns, the movements, the activities of a raven and a dove? Can you imagine the letdown every time you are hit with the reality that you have to offer God another 7 days of waiting? And might I remind us that this is another 7 days after 150 days and after 40 days of listening to the earth be flooded with water. I guess with the continual supremacist antics of this zero qualified leader that occupies the White House, country that is revealing its inner feelings towards people of color with COVID-19 sending us back inside for perhaps a second round of shutdowns and reports of massive infections, not to mention that by Monday we had lost a little over 130,000 people to COVID-19. But in that same period of time, roughly March to now, we've also lost 155,000 people to cancer. I know it won't last forever. I believe that trouble don't last always. I know that joy comes in the morning and that we can cast our cares upon the Lord. I know that a new day is coming, and I believe that waters of this affliction will recede. I'm convicted of all of it. I believe all of it. I celebrate all of it. I worship God for all of it. But I have a question. How do you motivate yourself to release a raven and a dove and believe that this might be the time? How do you recover from the letdown of seeing that raven flying with no place to perch and that dove returning because of the same? How do I keep myself motivated when my future seems closer than ever and farther than ever all at the same time? When I'm finding it difficult to manage both the anticipation and the disappointment, and I have to manage both at the same time to keep telling myself that I'm closer, and life seems to keep redefining what closer means, and closer at some point means not today. It's frustrating. It's depleting. But can I tell you that you are made just for this? Can I tell you that you are stronger than just the entry and the exit related to life's demands and encounters and exchanges? I want to say it again. Can I tell you you're made for this? You are stronger than just life's entries and exits related to life's demands and encounters and exchanges. You also are made strong enough and tough enough and resilient enough, and with Christ, spiritual enough to handle these frustrating days of trying and waiting and being stuck between the almost and the not yet. Isn't that a frustrating place to be in? No more floodwaters falling, but not enough floodwater receding to make a difference in my current state. Isn't it frustrating to be in a position where no more water is falling, but not enough water has receded to make a difference in my station in life? Living between doing what was required and waiting to reap from it. And every time I think it's today, life proves that things are changing, but not enough for me to step out of this current space I am presently occupying. This necessity in life To have to endure the additional 7 days had to be rough on Noah. And it had to challenge his patience and threaten his obedience and tempt his defiance and pull on his endurance. But he did it. And that's the point I want to make this weekend. He did it. And I know these were his realities because I know they're our realities. Not one of us is made of the stuff that would prevent us from having to deal with these all too real thoughts and emotions and theological perplexing reflections. But apparently there are times when that little leftover time and space between then and now and not yet starts to pull on you, whether it's every 7 days, 7 hours, 7 months, 7 years. God has made you strong enough to endure it. He's made you capable enough to handle it. He's made you spiritual enough to grow from it. We ain't playing when we say, I know that I reckon that the suffering of this present time is not worthy to be compared to the glory that shall be revealed. And weeping endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning. You're not made just for the weeping and the joy. You are made for the space in the middle too. Noah had to learn, and it won't take me long. Noah had to learn what I'm sure we're learning, and that is this. We have in Jesus Christ the capacity to endure anything. And I'll say that again. We have in Jesus Christ the capacity to endure anything. Do you know that you have much more endurance than you could ever know? You don't learn this until you're caught in that space between when your obedience locked you in, your patience delivered you through, and this close to the other side of things, you are prevented by the things not yet finished around you. You ask me, Pastor, how do I survive? How do I survive when doing what God says do locked me in? When being in demanded patience until he could deliver me through. And then being this close to the other side, but prevented from emerging from what I have survived. How do I manage space in between? Here's how you start managing it. You survive it by knowing you can. Another 7 days didn't kill Noah, and I need you to look at me. Another 7 days will not kill you either. It will never take more than life has in store for you when you finally are blessed to emerge. You will not be less of the person God intends for you to be because you have to do more time in that which you had hoped to be delivered from by now. And I really hope somebody hears me, because you have spiritual capacities in you that have been growing and maturing that are not revealed unless the flood waters are slow in receding. You don't know what you're capable of until you have to stand in front of the giant, or speak in front of the Pharaoh, or step outside of the boat, or try your slingshot and stone, or release your arrow, or stretch out your rod. Do I have any company in this place? You don't know how much God has given you the strength to persevere